Okay, so thank you everyone for coming and joining. I'm Rotem, and I want to talk a bit about ethical questions in software engineering. So I want to start with a short story. So a couple of years ago, there was in a highly acclaimed university in the technical faculty, the presenter asked the students a question. So you need to design a pipe that conducts blood between London and Paris. So what information do you need to collect in order to build that pipe? So the students thought and thought, and they came up with lots of questions like, what is the pipe made of? What's the topography of the field? What are the temperatures or things that can cause the blood to clot? But there was something that nobody asked. Anyone has an idea? What was the question that nobody asked?
How do you mix types of...
Yeah. Why? Yeah, exactly. Why? Why do you need to transfer blood between London and Paris? Whose blood is it? So ethics. Ethics is not really a new subject, right? Humanity has been talking, discussing, contemplating ethics for centuries. And everything we do has an ethical aspect. And like I won't try to go into a philosophical analysis of what is ethics. There's like lots of debate about it. And I also think that like we all have a common sense of what do we mean when we talk about ethics. And I think that basically it's, thinking about what is the consequences of what we do. Is it good? Is it bad? Does it hurt someone? Or is it good for people? So these are kind of the type of questions that I want to think about when I'm talking about ethics. And it's always important to talk about ethics, but I think that nowadays, and specifically in what we do in software development, it's becoming even more important. And there are two trends that make it more important than ever. The first is that software is really becoming the fabric of society. So it's the technology that is now driving almost everything we do, but as it progresses, it becomes less and less visible. So it's really the main technology that underlies everything, but it is hidden. As we progress, we less and less observe it. So software engineering, the practice that we do, is actually becoming one of the most influences practices that are out there today. It's really what we do shape the world that we create and that we live in. The second trend is a decline in liberal arts education. And when I'm talking about the decline, it's not just like liberal arts majors, right? It's also the tendency to have very specialized tracks in technical education. So if you look at most of the software engineering faculties, you don't see there as part of the curriculum philosophy or arts or psychology. You don't see humanistic studies as part of a technical curriculum. So it's, as we said, it's one of the most influencing practices, but we're creating people that are very, very much oriented into a specific direction and don't really learn how to discuss the broad aspects and the consequences of what we do as an industry. I find it pretty much alarming. And there's another important remark when we talk about ethics. So I've called this talk ethical questions in software engineering because I really believe that when we talk about ethics, there are no simple solutions, right? It's like lots of questions and it's hard to get to like concrete answers. And this is something that is sometimes hard to understand and to grasp, especially for people like us. We're used to like having a problem, finding an algorithm, creating the solution. Like it's really you create close-ended solutions for problems. And when we talk about ethics, there's almost never such a thing. It's basically thinking and trying to opening our minds to different aspects and different questions and different ways of looking at what is happening. Okay, so I want to go through like a list of examples of trying to think about ethical perspective of technological subjects. And this is going to be like a very anecdotal list of things that I personally find interesting. There's like a vast area of talking about ethics and technology and software engineering. There are a lot of things I won't touch. But these are like a few examples that personally are things that I find interesting. So like a good area to start with is autonomous cars. And this is a place where ethics is being discussed a lot nowadays, even in like popular media, because it's really like those problems are very apparent when we talk about subjects like autonomous cars. So there's a classical ethical dilemma which relate to that. It's called the trolley problem. Some of you probably have encountered that. And it goes something like that. So you have a train that is out on the loose, and it's going to hit a couple of people. And you're standing near a switch. You can throw that switch, and it means that the train will diverge to another track and won't hit the bunch of 5 people. But you know that if you do that, and it will go to the other track, it will kill 1 person. So do you throw the switch or not? It's a really hard ethical dilemma. And there are different perspectives and different ways of trying to analyze the ethics behind it. Each perspective may lead to a different solution. So it's really an open question. There's no close-ended solution to this problem. And that's part of the important things here. Like there's no really single solution that we can come with. It pretty much depends on our perspective of the world, on our priorities of values. There are a lot of things that may influence what we're going to do in this situation. It's not really a computational problem. So now if we take an autonomous car and we put it in the same position, and this is something that will probably happen, right? It's not improbable to think about such a case. So you have an autonomous car that is driving, and it's going to hit 5 people. And now it can diverge sideways, and then it's going to hit 1 person. So should the car diverge or not? Now, what if there's like 1 person in front and a child on the side? Should he diverge or not? What if there are 3 adults and 1 child? How do you create an algorithm to handle this situation? Like who can create this algorithm? Who is responsible for making this decision? And if someone is killed here, who will be responsible for the death? Is it the car manufacturer? Is it the programmer that was in charge of creating the algorithm? Is there no one that is in charge if such a death happens? And what does it mean as a society if suddenly there's no one who is responsible for such accidents? These are hard problems. And it's one of the many ethical issues that we encounter as we go into the area of machine learning and artificial intelligence. And we're building systems to make decisions. And that has always been like a large part of what we do and what computers do, right? We write software to make decisions. But the nature of the questions that we ask is changing. It's now becoming more and more open-ended questions. Like questions like, who should the car hit? That's really an open-ended question. Or things like, what information are we exposed to? So what we see in our Facebook feed is now one of the main sources of information that we see. Or who should a company hire? You have automated machine learning-based HR systems that rank candidates. Or even in the law enforcement, you have systems that give risk to people and assess if they may commit another crime. And there are concrete examples for that. This is, for example, a case that happened a couple of years ago in Wisconsin. There was a guy named Eric Loomis, and he was found guilty in participating in a drive-by shooting. And he was given a long sentence, part of it because he was given a high-risk score by a risk assessment tool that the court used. Now, later on, Loomis challenged the sentence on the grounds that it was a privately developed algorithm, and he was not able to assess what was the algorithm and why was he given this score. Later on, the state Supreme Court ruled against him. But the questions that are coming up from this event are pretty basic. Like, how much can we rely on such black box, on privately developed algorithms to make this kind of social impact decisions in the court of law? And who is responsible for this algorithm? Who are they answering for? Like, who is overseeing the decisions that are becoming there? Are we okay with relying on privately developed algorithm and black box software for such decisions? And let's say it's becoming something that will be commonly used in courts. We can assume that since it's software, it's kind of deterministic, right? For the same set of input, it will give the same output. So as a society, are we willing to give away the diversity of human opinion? Like today in courts, you have different judges. Each one has a different opinion, maybe a different set of values. This is partly something that we build upon. Can we exchange it with a deterministic algorithm? Again, these are questions that we need to ask as a society. That's another example of relying on automation and machine learning. So this happened last year in Israel. A Palestinian man was arrested after publishing this post in Facebook. So in Arabic, the post says, "Good morning." But the Facebook automatic translation made a mistake. And like the same word in Arabic, if you change one letter, it means hurt them or attack them. And that is what Facebook translated it to Hebrew. And a policeman saw this post that was geolocated in an Israeli settlement because the guy worked there. He read the wrong translation in Hebrew, he didn't know Arabic, and they went and arrested this man. So this is really an example how like small features that we think are very helpful may have very big social impacts that we don't even consider. This is a fun example that I guess some of you may have encountered. A team in MIT wanted to show the effect of training data on the output of machine learning algorithms. So they took generic AI for image captioning, and they trained it on a data set that they took from like one of the darker subreddits that are out there. And like you can see the difference of worldviews between two algorithms. They took images of a Rorschach test, and they gave it one to the AI that they trained on the darker data set, and one on the same AI that was trained on like a regular data set. This is the output. So there's a tendency, I think, probably mostly in the general public, to think that we're better off taking such decisions and give them to computers because they're not humans, they're not biased. It will be less biased decisions. And I think technology companies also like to give this worldview also. It's good for business to think that computers can make better decisions. But the reality is that a lot of times when we use such machine learning algorithms, it actually brings up biases that were hidden in the data that we feed into it. that we're sometimes not even aware of. So lots of times, instead of making it less biased, we actually amplify biases because we're not aware of the biases that are hidden in the data that we generate. That's another well-known example of image recognition gone wrong. So a couple of years ago, this guy posted on Twitter that the automatic labeling of Google Photos labeled his friend as a gorilla. Now, the Google engineers at least were quick to respond and to make it better. So yeah, we can say that for their benefit. But it's not a single example. There were generations of digital cameras that always interpreted Asian eyes as blinking, and then they marked the photos as flawed. And there were webcams with face recognition that couldn't identify faces that had darker skin tones. And like, we understand why this is happening, right? We mark this as bugs and we know how to fix it and we understand where it's coming from. But it brings out questions about our reliance on such algorithms. And also, as lots of people who discuss this keep on bringing up, it also brings up the issue of diversity. We work in a pretty much controlled environment, which is, we have to admit, it's not really representative, right? Our surroundings. And the things that we develop in these surroundings seems to be working okay, but when we release them out to the open, sometimes it breaks because the world is much more diverse. And we really need to think about diversity and data and how we develop and how we test things in such an environment. So how far are we willing to go with trusting algorithms? This is kind of a way out there example. So this is RootClaim. It's a startup who has the mission of creating the ultimate truth machine. So they want to build a platform to assess real-world issues by eliminating human bias and arriving to evidence-based conclusions. So it's basically a platform. You input into it a question, a couple of hypotheses, the list of evidence and facts, and then the platform can assess the probability of the hypothesis to be true. And it has currently it has mostly sample questions like this one: what caused the chemical calamity in Khan Shaykhun? Questions like, did Pakistan know that Osama bin Laden was hiding in Abbottabad? And also, what is the story behind Donald Trump's hair? Which, if you want to know, by the way, 60% it's a flap surgery. That's what they decided. So it's quite a bold and utopian task, right? Creating the ultimate truth machine. And even if we put aside the technological problems of creating such a thing, are we asking enough questions about what are the consequences of doing such a thing? Like, what are the social implications of relying on an algorithmical platform to decide what is true and what is not? What are the implications to the judicial system, to public opinion, to how you can manipulate public opinion? What does it mean for human decision-making, for society? And are there enough people who can think about those aspects that are involved in companies that are trying to do such things? Do we have enough people that are asking the right questions? So we talked, we went to the big questions, the ultimate truth machine, and now I want to, for a minute, zoom down to smaller things. So what's the problem in this image? Anyone has an idea? There's an ethical issue here.
Autoplay.
Correct, autoplay. What's the problem with autoplay?
Financial incentive.
It's a financial incentive. It's also in YouTube, it's on by default, right? if you go to YouTube the first time, autoplay will be on. So what's the ethics of this feature? It really means that you need to make a conscious and an active choice not to watch the next video. So this is an example of an opt-in, opt-out dilemma, right? In this case, we can say that we're tricked into watching videos over and more videos. So every time that we present an option to a user and we need to decide if it's going to be opt-in or opt-out, there might be an ethical dilemma that is really hiding behind it. And in this case, it's also an example of features that we design as part of what is globally called as the attention economy, right? It's one of the multiple ways that social platforms are built to keep users engaged. But who is benefiting from this engagement? Is it good for the user at all? We create a lot of features like that, but are we asking really what's the ethics behind it? And who's the beneficiary of it? Are we honest with ourselves? So media. Media is an important subject because historically it was really one of the most important pillars of sustaining a healthy society and democracy. But traditional media is changing. A lot of it is dying, and it's being replaced by a new media technology, and it's social media. And social media changes the way we consume information, the way we create information. And the way we design and create those platforms really affects how information is spreading, created, and consumed in society. And there's a lot of good in social media, right? Like, I'm an avid user. I can't really diss it completely. I'm pretty much hooked. But there's also a dark side. And in a historical perspective, this is a media technology that is really new, and it's rapidly changing. Like, it's not really stable. It's constantly changing. And it's hard to assess the impacts it's having on society. But we're starting to see some things, and we're starting to understand some of the consequences of it. So we can see that, like, social media really, it has an effect of a short attention span, right? And it has virality effects. And we can see that those are helping promote hate speech and racism in ways that really have concrete effects on people's lives across the world. And that's because there's a preference, like information that generates intense emotions and that plays on primal feelings like fear and anger moves faster than information that needs like thoughtful consideration. We can see that already. And this really creates a preference of spreading lies and misleading information. So when we create a platform that helps this kind of information moves faster, in ways we actually amplify mob action over like thoughtful and cautious data ingestion. And it's not something that we want to do, right? Nobody wants to build such a platform. But we can see, we're starting to see that these effects are really coming as part of the features and the design of these platforms. And it's not really being ignored. There's more and more discussions about it, and I think a lot of people in those companies and the founders are really getting a bit more conscious about what they're doing, and there are genuine attempts to deal with this issue. But those attempts are still contained in kind of the scope that these platforms are building on, right? It's like adding a feature here, adding a feature there, maybe changing some features to try and handle issues of spamming and hate speech and something like that. But do we really ask the right questions about this kind of media? And I think it's important in this respect to also listen to critics like Jaron Lanier and Douglas Rushkoff, and to try and understand their perspective. And what they're saying basically is that there's a fundamental flaw in social media. The whole business model that it is built on is flawed from essence. And this is because it is really built on manipulation, right? Basically, if we take platforms like Facebook or any social media platform, basically it manipulates interaction between people for the gains of someone else, of a third party. So the technology that we're using daily for like our main source of information and media consumption and generation is actually a platform that is built on manipulation. And it is not built really for the benefit of the actual people who are using it. Its intention is to profit another party altogether. So what Jaron Lanier said, for instance, is if we really want to fix social media and the damage that it is doing to society, we really need to change the fundamental business model that is behind it. And we need to have this platform having a direct consideration of the customer, of us, of the people that are really using it. There needs to be a strong relationship between the platform and the people that are using it and the benefit that they are getting from it. And like I said in the beginning, I don't know if that's the answer, right? It's hard to say if there's a single answer and what is true and what is the way to solve things. But the point is that we really need to ask those questions. These are hard questions, and the things that we build have real impact and real consequences on society. And we really need to take it into consideration when we do our job. And I think we also need to think really hard about the ethos of technology companies. So like this is something that we all heard, right? Move fast and break things, the Facebook ethos. Would we accept that from a company that is building bridges? Would we accept that from a company that is making medical equipment for hospitals? We need to start and think about technological companies in the real context. So companies like Uber or Airbnb or Facebook, the fact that they use digital technology in their core business, it does not remove them from the area that they really work in, right? It can be taxi services for Uber or vacation rentals or media. It's a media company. Technology is not a get out of jail card. We cannot have technology as something that lets companies an excuse to not take responsibility for the actual business that they are doing. And also, just because technology enables you to build something, that doesn't mean that you need to build it. So this is a good example for that. It's a startup called Parking. And what it does, it is a platform for trading parking places. It's not private places, but parking places on the street. So you park on the street, you're going to drive and to free your parking. You can offer it in the application. Someone else that is driving and looking for a parking can buy it from you, and like you wait for him, he's coming, you go out, he goes in, you get paid. You know, it's riding on the wave of sharing economy and companies like Airbnb and things like that. But it's really taking the concept of the sharing economy and like take it to a very exploitive edge. So what happens here is they're really trying to capitalize on public property, right? It's the digital equivalent of opening a private parking garage on someone else's field. So the fact that technology allows you to build such a platform does not really mean that you should do it. So back to social networks. I like this area. A different aspect. A couple of years ago, Facebook released a post in its People Insight blog. It's a research they did about breakup moments and how they influence people's online behavior. So they looked at the changes of interactions on Facebook after breakup of people, and they saw what language people used, when do they post about it, the online purchasing behavior. And they found that people after breakup are more likely to be interested in experience like travel and not just buying stuff. And the post concludes with recommendation to marketers of what signals can you track and how can you offer people the right offer at the right time. I think the ethical questions here are pretty much obvious, right? Should a company use behavioral tracking for trying to do such a thing, to catch people like at delicate times and to offer that to marketers, how to reach people when they're hurt? And I think Facebook figured out this was a touchy subject because as far as I can see, they took the post down and it's not on their blog anymore. So. And that's a more recent example. So this is last Christmas in the US. Netflix US tweeted this tweet to the 53 people who watch the Christmas Prince every day. Who hurt you? So this really annoyed the hell out of a lot of people. Like, people were really offended by this tweet. They were offended to discover that their viewing habits are used by Netflix to analyze their personality. Later on, Netflix tried to explain that this is all like aggregated data, it's not personal, they don't keep it on a personal level, but like the image wasn't too good after they did that. But there was another interesting response to the same tweet. So this guy posted a response on Reddit, and he told his story. So he told that one summer he was going through an episode of depression. And he spent 1 week doing nothing, then sitting in his room and watching Netflix. And then he got an email from Netflix asking if he was okay, because they noticed that his viewing habits had changed and his account was running nonstop. And the guy says that this actually made him feel better. Like it made him feel better that there was some guy over at Netflix noticing that something is changed and is wrong with him and taking the time to send him an email to see if he was okay. So we're talking about behavioral tracking, right? And possible ethical issues that are coming from it. So is it good? Is it bad? I don't know. It's complicated. That's the point. So let's assume for a minute that we care about ethics. So what can we actually do? I think one of the most important things that we can do is to ask questions, not take things for granted. Keep on asking, trying to see all the time what can happen, what are the consequences, how is society affected, and try to talk about it. Like, this is my small attempt of trying to raise more awareness to such issues. And we're also lucky that we're still in a position where we matter. Technology talent is still scarce and companies need us. And we still have some saying about what is happening. And we can see here and there some examples of employees that are actually taking a stand and affecting what is happening in the companies that they work for. And it can be, deals or developments for all kinds of things that companies are doing. And it can also be what is happening in the workplace and how people are getting treated, how employees are getting treated, diversity in the workplace, you know, not doing toxic environments, stuff like that. And another powerful thing that we have on our hands is actually deciding where we work, right? We can, a lot of times, pick the companies we work for. So we can try and pick those places that are really trying to do less evil, or at least don't work for the obvious evil ones. Porn, gambling, other intrusive and exploitive companies, just don't work for them. For those interested, there are these kind of pledges like Never Again Tech that try to group people together, people that are conscious about the values and morals of the tech industry. Another important, this is really important, education. So there's like very few programs like this one from the Santa Clara University that are concentrating on ethics and technology, but usually we don't see them, right? In most technical education, you don't really see any education that is concerning philosophy or ethics or how it affects people. And we have the people that are building like really the most influencing technology today, and they don't have any practice or education about trying to understand what they're doing. And I think that's so harmful. Like, we cannot have that as a society. We really need to insist that part of technology studies should be understanding what is ethics and how it affects what we do. And last thing, I think we need to be more humble as an industry. Like, we don't have all the answers, and technology does not have all the answers, and technology is not the answer for everything. And we need to stop idolizing technology founders and leaders. Like, yes, there are smart people, but sometimes they have narrow worldview, and sometimes they have problematic personalities. Like, I think the bottom line is that we really need to be good people, not just good developers. So just to finish about the blood pipeline. So this is actually a true story that is told about the Israeli Technion Institution, which is a leading technology university in Israel. And in the 60s, there was a new president that was appointed to the Technion, and he wanted to introduce humanistic studies to the curriculum, as part of the curriculum. And the professors on the board didn't really understand why. Why do you need in a technology institution to study humanistic studies? And then the story, as the story goes, he went to one of the classes, he asked this question, later on he came to the board and presented what the students asked about it, and they were shocked, and then they all agreed to add humanistic studies to the curriculum of the Technion. So that's the historical story. That's it.